the last time I trusted my family. They stole my grandmother's name, then forged her signature to erase mine. I remember the exact sound of betrayal, the soft click of a pen, my mother's calm voice saying, "It's for the family, Drusilla." That's what they always said, for the family, right before they stripped me of something that was mine. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I just watched the woman who gave me life sign away everything that proved I ever belonged. They thought I would stay quiet, that I'd accept the lie. But the moment I saw that forged signature, my grandmother's name trembling across stolen paper, I knew one thing for certain. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance, they had awakened Drusilla Hawthorne. And this time, I was the one writing the terms. I started that morning the way I always do, with coffee and silence. But the silence cracked apart with a single sound. The sharp ping of an incoming email. Subject, security alert, attempted access detected. Account REHF 0214. My hand froze halfway to the cup. That number hadn't appeared anywhere in nearly 4 years. Not since we buried my great-grandmother, Eleanor Hawthorne. She'd built Hawthorne Investments from the ground up and was the only person in my bloodline who never treated me like an inconvenience. Once, while her hands trembled from age, she'd said, "When they try to erase you from the family, the bank will speak for me." I never understood what she meant. Until now. Before I could read further, my phone rang. My mother's voice slid through the receiver, sweet and polished, the kind of sweetness that hides something sour. "Drusilla, come back to Charleston tonight. The family needs to meet." "The family," I repeated. "Yes, it's about your great-grandmother. And please, don't turn it into a scene this time." This time, the last scene she meant was when they sold my shares in the family company without even telling me. I stood by the window of my Boston apartment, maple leaves bleeding red across the glass. Sunlight spilled over the framed photograph on my desk. Me, beside Eleanor, outside the Geneva National Bank. Both of us smiling at a world that felt safe back then. I whispered to the photo, "Grandmother, I think they've started again." Just as I reached to close my laptop, another email appeared. Access attempt originated from Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston, the city where my father lived with his new wife and their perfect little family. It wasn't about money anymore. It was a declaration of war. The Charleston estate always felt too heavy to breathe in. Every column, every marble step was built to impress, not to welcome. When I walked into the dining hall, my father rose with a politeness so practiced it felt foreign. Patrice, his wife, didn't bother standing. Her eyes gleamed with a satisfaction that needed no words. Julian leaned back in his chair, smiling like a man convinced the world already belonged to him. Beside him, Amara held their newborn son, rocking the child as if innocence could soften arrogance. "Drusilla, you made it," my mother said, voice light as silk, eyes sharp enough to cut. "You said there was something important," I replied. My father adjusted his tie, a tell he never outgrew. "We've finalized the redistribution of your great-grandmother's estate. The assets will go to Julian, to preserve the family line." I smiled faintly. She believed in fairness, not preservation. Patrice's tone was honeyed poison. "Julian has a baby now. You're single, successful, comfortable. You don't need inheritance to survive." I placed my glass down gently. How comforting to know my stepmother worries about my stability. They slid a folder across the table. The updated inheritance agreement bore my great-grandmother's signature, shaky, distorted, and wrong. I'd memorized her handwriting since childhood. This was a cheap imitation of love turned into fraud. "Who notarized this?" I asked quietly. "The local registry," my father muttered, eyes fixed on his plate. I didn't argue. I only looked up at the portrait of Eleanor Hawthorne looming above them. The light caught her painted eyes, and for a moment, I could swear she was staring straight through the lies. Dinner ended in silence. As I rose to leave, Julian's voice followed me, laced with mockery. Glad you came, sis. It's historic, after all. I turned back once. History always leaves room for an aftermath. Outside, the air was thick and hot. I checked my phone, an email from the Geneva National Bank. Attached, scanned copy of forged signature, identical to official documents on file. They'd gotten reckless, and that was the first mistake I would make them pay for. That night in Boston, I went straight to the safe tucked behind my bookshelf. My hands didn't shake until I saw it. Eleanor's silver USB, untouched since college. She'd handed it to me the day I left Charleston. Never let anyone touch this, she'd said. It isn't money, it's truth. I plugged it in. A string of encrypted files appeared, labeled with codes I recognized from old family ledgers, bank identifiers, asset transfers, ownership chains. One folder stood out, Eleanor Protocol. As the files decrypted, I realized what she'd built. A financial defense system so intricate it could expose fraud anywhere in the world, designed specifically to protect her fortune from her own heirs. Then, buried beneath the spreadsheets, a single audio file blinked. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, rasped but steady. If you're hearing this, they've begun. Find Mr. Weber at the Geneva National Bank. He knows what must be done. And Drusilla, don't let forgiveness come too soon. A chill ran through me. The monitor flickered, and another email appeared. Someone from Charleston submitted forged power of attorney documents. Access attempt blocked. Awaiting instruction from D. Hawthorne. I sat motionless, feeling her presence behind me, her hand on my shoulder, her certainty in my blood. Justice had been waiting, patient and precise. I typed my reply, each keystroke deliberate. Proceed with verification. I'll see you in Geneva. The glow from the screen reflected in my eyes as I leaned back. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was about the honor of a woman who built an empire and the descendants who dared to bury her truth. I landed in Geneva under a blanket of early mist, the kind of quiet that makes every decision feel louder. Mr. Weber's office was all glass and precise angles. He greeted me with a firm, unreadable handshake. On his screen, a lattice of accounts and trusts flashed under the label EHF. The Eleanor Protocol has two outcomes, he said without flourish. Valid access activates the trust. Forgery triggers a global freeze. As he walked me through the network, the scope hit me. Holdings in Switzerland, shares tied into Hawthorne investments, estates across 3 continents. They tried to divert everything to Julian, he added. They even used your mother's signature. My fingers dug into my palm. Can it be undone? I asked. It already is, he said. The protocol initiated. You must choose, full reclaim or a quieter correction. He handed me a sealed envelope, my grandmother's letter, stored at the bank for 15 years. Her handwriting read like a verdict. Let them taste victory. When they do, justice will ring out. Activate the reclaim clause, I said, and make sure they see every step. Weber paused, then murmured, She did this once, against her own brother. In that moment, I saw the family's silence as inheritance. Back in Boston 2 days later, Marion met me at the airport. She skimmed the Geneva files and went still. If this is real, it's federal, international property fraud. She found a falsified fingerprint authenticated by an internal certifier from within Hawthorne Investments, Julian's territory. They'd used the company's own machinery to make the theft look legitimate. That night, my mother texted, Let the past lie. Don't ruin what we've built, I replied. They didn't build with truth. Then Weber's encrypted file arrived. The forgery requests weren't only Julian's work. Lucinda, my mother, was a signer on the fraudulent power of attorney. I sat in my dark apartment while rain tracked down the window. The silence felt like a held breath. I recorded one line, soft and steady. Phase 1 complete. Begin the silent return. I learned from Eleanor that silence can be the deadliest snare. 3 weeks after Geneva, I walked back into Charleston and wore my surrender like a costume. Patrice greeted me with that triumphant smile. Julian squeezed my hand and said, as if lecturing, "Good to see you accept things. Families shouldn't fight." I smiled the quiet smile they expected. That night, before bed in the room I grew up in, my phone buzzed. Eleanor Protocol, Stage 2 initiated. All global assets under audit. I replied. Proceed quietly. The bank's audit crawled through everything tied to Hawthorne, accounts, offshore holdings, estates from Boston to Singapore, now flagged pending verification. The next morning, Patrice threw a small celebration for the restructured estate. I wore a simple black dress and handed Julian an old leather ledger, the ledger of Eleanor, telling him it had belonged to her. He thanked me without opening it. Hidden in that binding was a tiny tracking chip, nothing dramatic, just a quiet witness to where their money moved. By afternoon, Weber texted, "Your stepmother attempted to wire 4.8 noniers to a Cayman account under a fake ID. System froze it." I felt the cold run down my spine and typed only, "Let it be. I want them to feel the rope tighten." Patrice had no idea her clumsy transfer tripped the protocol's final clause, full reversion and criminal referral. 3 days later, Weber confirmed, all transactions suspended, company accounts frozen, local authorities notified. I answered once, "Thank you. Do not contact me again until they panic." 6 days later, the headlines blew up. Hawthorne Investments under international fraud investigation. In class, a student whispered, "Are you related to them?" I nodded coolly. "My family teaches a lot about ethics." My phone filled with messages. Dad, "Drusilla, do you know what's happening?" Mother, "Don't say you're involved." Julian, "Why are accounts frozen?" Patrice, "Everything's collapsing. What did you do?" I didn't reply. I called Weber. "All properties, shares, and offshore accounts are frozen," he said. "They cannot legally transfer title. Original authority belongs to you." Then he opened the Eleanor legacy clause. My grandmother had hidden a 51% controlling interest in a Swiss holding under my name. I had been the de facto owner all along. "With one signature, you reclaim everything," Weber warned. "But your family will lose authority. Permanently." I looked at his calm face and said, "Sign it. Make it public." When the bank sent the global notice, effective immediately, Drusilla Eleanor Hawthorne assumes controlling ownership of all Hawthorne assets, my mother called, wailing, "What are you doing? You're killing our family." "No," I answered, steady. "I'm opening the will they falsified." Someone demanded the phone. My father barked, "Stop!" I heard it all. I hung up. Outside, rain began, first cold drops of the season, falling like a slow absolution over Charleston's sins. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and old money. I had walked these halls as a child behind my father's coat. Today, I walked in alone and took the chair at the head of the table. The Hawthorne logo was carved deep into the center of the long gavel-streaked table. Above it, my great-grandmother's painted eyes watched like a judge. They sat there, my father, my mother, Patrice, Julian, and Amara clutching her baby, faces hollowed by sleepless weeks. I opened my leather case and set 2 folders down between us. One, a file to take them to federal court for international financial fraud. The other, a withdrawal agreement and a fixed monthly stipend. "I'll be brief," I said. "You have 2 choices. 1, we go to trial. 2, you sign the withdrawal and accept the terms." Julian sprang up. "You can't do this. This is our company." I looked at him without heat. "Which family?" "This company belongs to the one person who never lied in her will. Eleanor. She left it to me." I turned on the screen. A cascade of transactions, forged signatures, and Geneva scans filled the wall, stamped in bold, "Fraud detected." The room swallowed its breath. Patrice's voice cracked. We did it for the baby's future. Towns don't stay standing if you build them on theft, I said softly. My father begged for a private settlement. Drusilla, we can handle this quietly. You hid behind silence, I replied. When you refused to speak, others turned truth into an instrument. My mother wept. We are a family, Drusilla. No, I said, each word measured. Family is people who don't betray you when you turn away. One by one, they signed. Their hands trembled on the paper. When the last stroke fell, I slid an envelope across to Amara. This is a trust for your child. He won't inherit their sins. She sobbed, thank you. The door closed. I looked up at Eleanor's portrait and felt nothing like triumph, only the steady quiet of justice finally carried out. 3 weeks later, the name Hawthorne Holdings was taken down from the stone wall outside the Boston headquarters. In its place, new silver letters gleamed in the morning light. Eleanor Ethical Trust. The rebranding wasn't just cosmetic, it was a declaration. The press gathered in the lobby for the announcement. Flashbulbs sparked as I stood at the podium, the company's new emblem behind me. Today, I began, we're not erasing history, we're correcting it. I announced the creation of the Eleanor Foundation for Ethical Finance, a nonprofit dedicated to funding women entrepreneurs and teaching financial ethics across universities. A reporter called out, Ms. Hawthorne, do you see reclaiming the company as revenge? I smiled, not defensively, but with a calm that came from clarity. If justice looks like revenge to some, I said, then maybe that says more about how comfortable they've become with injustice. I don't call it revenge. I call it restoring order. The applause that followed felt distant. Afterward, when the cameras cleared, my father came to my office. His face had aged in weeks, lines carved deeper, eyes subdued. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I thought silence would keep peace. Silence doesn't keep peace, I answered. It keeps corruption alive. He nodded, eyes wet. For a moment, he looked less like the man who'd abandoned his integrity and more like the father I'd once admired. I didn't reach for him, but as he turned to leave, I said softly, You can work with the foundation if you want. Eleanor believed people could fix what they broke, if they had the courage. He stopped at the door, swallowed hard, then left without a word. A week later, an encrypted email arrived from Mr. Weber. Per your grandmother's instruction, an additional fund has been released, $10 million for the Foundation's moral education program. I stared at the screen. Even from the grave, Eleanor had planned for this, every outcome, every possibility. She had foreseen that I would choose redemption over destruction. That night, I sat at my desk, papers spread before me, the new charter, the bylaws, the bank release forms. I signed the final authorization, hand trembling just slightly. Outside, the city lights blurred against the glass, reflections bending like ripples on calm water. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of victory or the ache of betrayal. What filled me instead was something quieter, cleaner, continuity. This wasn't triumph, it was transition. The empire they'd tried to steal was now reborn as something greater than profit. Eleanor's justice had come full circle, and for the first time, it was no longer mine alone to carry. 3 years later, the rhythm of my life had changed to something quieter, steadier, almost ordinary. I now taught ethics in investment at Harvard, and every semester began the same way. I'd turn to the board and write Eleanor's words in clean white chalk. Integrity is the highest currency. The students would copy it down, their faces young, bright, unscarred by betrayal or ambition gone wrong. None of them knew the woman teaching them once stood at the center of one of the most infamous corporate collapses in American finance. And I never told them. After class, I returned to my office overlooking the Charles River. The winter light stretched long and gold across the water, steady and forgiving. My phone buzzed with a single email from Mr. Weber. Final consolidation complete. The Hawthorne Trust now bears only one name: Drusilla Eleanor Hawthorne. I stared at it for a long moment, then smiled. That name, half hers, half mine, felt like the merging of two lives separated by time, but bound by purpose. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and took out the old leather ledger I'd once given to Julian's son. It had found its way back to me last Christmas, wrapped with a childish note that said, "Dad says you're the reason we're okay." Inside, blank pages waited. I began filling them with plans for the next decade of the Eleanor Foundation for Ethical Finance: scholarships, mentorship programs, educational grants. On the first page, in firm ink, I wrote, "Legacy isn't inherited. It's earned." Sunlight pooled across the photograph on my wall, Eleanor and me, standing outside the Geneva National Bank, the day she'd told me, "Never let them make you small." I'd spent years thinking she was warning me about power. Now I understood she was talking about truth. Outside, the afternoon brightened. The river shimmered like liquid glass. I leaned back and whispered to the air, "Thank you, Grandma. Justice isn't a burden anymore. It's a gift." As I shut down my computer, another message appeared, short, unsigned, except for one initial. "Your grandmother would be proud. W." I laughed softly, the sound echoing against the quiet of the room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed back. "Tell her I finally understand her favorite word. Equilibrium." For a moment, I watched the cursor blink, steady and rhythmic, before the screen dimmed. The light outside deepened into amber, washing everything in the color of closure. There was no triumph left to feel, only peace. The world didn't need to know how justice had been restored. It only needed to see what came after. The Hawthorne name would live on, not as a warning, but as proof that even in silence, truth endures, and that sometimes the most enduring legacy isn't victory at all, but the quiet balance left when every wrong has finally been set right.